Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're doing another installment of the weekly meta breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. This particular video will be for traditional standard, best of 3. If you're looking for best of 1 standards in the playlist, we'll be covering the other formats, Explore, Historic, and Alchemy if there's enough data, best of 1, best of 3. Each week we try to cover it. Playlist is down below. So you can always check those out. As always, we get the data from UntapGG, what you see on the screen. Companion tool that runs alongside Arena, tracks your own win rates, aggregates it with other users, gives us all these cool stats. Link is in the video description if you want to get started today, but I will paste all these deck lists, so don't worry about it. You can easily import it. We're also going to be looking at an MTGO Magic the Gathering Online recent standard challenge. There's sometimes some deviations, get some innovation there as well. But just before we jump in, quick reminder, we are trying to hit 10,000 subs on the channel. We had a goal of the end of June. We got to about 9,100, so close, but I greatly appreciate if you could drop a sub. Free, easy, helps with the channels. If you're already subbed or if you don't want to sub, at least likes help a long way. Any content you consume, a like literally clicking a button, and it helps the channel, helps the YouTube algorithm, so greatly appreciate it if you can. So we are going to start off with looking at kind of the meta percentage, and then we'll look at the last week of Diamond to Mythic rank standard in terms of the win rate of the decks. So something that I always preface, popularity of a deck doesn't necessarily correlate to the deck necessarily being the best deck. People play decks that are bad sometimes because they just like the decks, or they're stuck on wild cards, or whatever reason. I will say this is like incredibly inbred meta. Green is basically banned from the format. Like if you play green outside of like a Traxa, you basically have to uninstall Arena, but this is just a disgusting spread. So hopefully you like Esper, because Esper colors are here to stay. Esper Control. Last week we didn't have Esper Control. This week, 14% of the meta. Dimir Midrange, 13% of the meta. Esper Legends, 8% of the meta. Azorius Control, kind of fitting in that control. So almost 20% of the meta is just like white exile based control kind of coming in. We have the 5-color domain list at 8%. Again, just a lot of white based exile. Mono red trying to make an appearance, some Selesnya decks, as well as mono black control. So the big thing, and I was having some conversations with some other creators, just some folks in general, like folks in my Discord, and I think like a big thing with this format, they banned cards that should have been banned, which is correct. Invoke Despair, they banned the Fable, the Mirror Breaker, they banned Bankbuster. The problem is they didn't balance. So what happened is they just shifted the problem to something else. There was a lot of powerful white cards that now had natural stopgaps. So like heavy planeswalker control decks where your opponent doesn't really do anything were punished because you can 2-for-1 a lot of value with like Bankbuster or Fable or deal with their planeswalker or something like that. There's not that anymore. So you have to play more into the sweepers, stuff of that nature, which then kind of makes them come up. But between like Wandering Emperor should have probably been hit, maybe Rafine. Like there's other cards that should have been kind of considered. Even just having access to 2 sweepers in the format that strictly exile, and even if you consider a temporary lockdown just for like more aggressive decks, dealing with a lot, the fact that your sweepers can also deal with cards that normally are evasive. So something like an enchantment or a artifact that can get around sweepers gets hit by Farewell. If you have recursive elements, I was trying to play a black deck with Tenacious Underdog and Razor Slash, something that's generally good against heavy removal. Well, it just gets caught by exile. Even in the mono black control deck that we'll take a look at during the standard challenge, your sideboard option is to bring in Phyrexian Arena to kind of grind out. Well, the Arena just gets hit by that same Farewell that's also ruining my board. So you kind of get like battered in so many different ways. And a lot of the folks, like even when I posted the best of 1, they're just really kind of jaded and burnt out by having all their stuff kind of exiled. So a little bit of a rant. That's kind of where my thoughts are on standard. Let me know what you think if you agree, but we're going to jump into it. So we have June 19th through to the 26th. Diamond and Mythic rank, 17,000 best of 3 matches. And we're going to start off with aforementioned Esper Control. 69%, 70% win rate in best of 3. So like I said, this is a deck that's just really saying no. It is predominantly winning through the Wandering Emperor. That is the main win condition of the deck. So you have that, you have a Sunfall token, and you have Sunset Revelry and 1 Siphon Insight. So better hope you draw what you need. You also have 2 Myrex, but it's very much just repeatedly forcing your opponent to not play the game. Now, I can play Control. I've used to play Control. I was big into Sphinx's Revelation Snapcaster. The thing is, this deck not only... It just kills everything, but it doesn't close out the game quickly, necessarily. At least in, like historic, you have all the Storm Giants. You can quickly pivot. You can have a Shark Typhoon. Just ways to kind of close out the game faster. But this deck, so you got Cut Downs, you got Go for the Throats, you got Counter Spells and Disdainful Stroke, Dissipate, Make Disappear, Negate. You have Card Advantage, Silver Scrutiny. Void Rend gets around a lot of the ward abilities, things that would kind of make you force maybe like Discard Effect, an extra tax, anything of that nature. Edicts deal with your opponent's Planeswalkers. Deluge refills your hand. And then just the 5 exile sweepers. In the sideboard, you have Duresses to kind of deal with the kind of mirrors, more counters, Siphon for the grindier matchups, for the aggressive matchups. You have Sunset Revelry. Most folks will be removing their removal spells against you. So you bring in the Seed Shark, and then you can go wide, Temporary Lockdown for the more aggressive decks, and then Shieldred, like against mono red, stuff like that, can also help in those types of formats. So this is generally not the type of deck, like I said, I enjoy being the best deck in the format, or towards the top, and we'll see it kind of show up as well in MTGO leagues. We have Esper Legends, which it's a deck. So I did a sideboard guide on this, so it's up on the video, the playlist as well. So if you're interested in that, I go over some of the configuration, stuff of that nature, if you want to see how to sideboard with that. This Esper Control deck wasn't a thing then, but you might need to configure. So obviously, if you can get the good curve of like Skrelv into Thalia, it plays out nicely because you can tax your opponent. Rafine draws you cards. You have Urtai as a counterspell. I think with the increased number of control decks, you might want to do a 2-3 split. Honestly, with the amount of exile, I think even just cutting AO, maybe for like another Urtai, maybe even two more Urtais, because AO just doesn't really do much in a format with so much exile based. For the core of this deck, you're playing Legends, you're taking advantage of Plaza Heroes, the discard effects kind of come in nice with Connive because you can put cards under Toulouse. But even with Toulouse, like this is a card that generally is something you want against heavy removal because you discard the cards, but then you get card advantage. But this is a death trigger. So when it dies, not when it leaves the battlefield. Same with AO, a card that generally you'd want in a heavy removal, but all these sweepers exile. So it kind of invalidates so much in terms of death triggers, which is really annoying. The sideboard, you have Cut Down for aggressive decks, Surge of Salvation for red-black removal, Disdainful Stroke and Negate for big mana decks, Lauren for artifact enchantments, Temporary Lockdown as well for the more aggressively slanted decks. So Dimir Control. So I will say, if you're planning on playing kind of like the black-based mid-range, I did a video on it because I was putting up some lists, or like some results on MTGO. The deck felt really bad into Control. I think if you want to play more of a black-based mid-range, play this Dimir deck. It's got those elements in terms of like your Lilies, Underdogs, your removal, your Shieldreds, but you back it up with interaction in terms of counterspells, as well as just threats that don't get swept up necessarily by like sweepers. So you have your Kaidos, both Kaidos are featured here, Teferi, so a nice Planeswalker package. Fairy Mastermind is a nice threat that you can flash in, draw your cards off your opponent, plays nicely with Urtai. If you counter something during their turn, you have Fairy Mastermind out. It forces your opponent to draw a card, so that's 2 cards drawn for the turn. You get to draw a card, so some nice abilities there. The counters are big because it lets you play around like those big bombs. So like I played 2 matches against 2 different Esper decks, and I got milled out 3 to the 4 games with Breach the Multiverse Jace in that particular instance. But just like going over the top, this helps you with like the Atraxa matchups, the Breaches, the Atalis that could generally go over the top versus you. Myrex in the mana base for utility. Your sideboard, just it's basically, can I kill something? Can I counter something? Can I discard something? Kill, discard, counter, kill white or green things. This is a pretty decent threat against Graveyard Hate, just heavy removal that's not kind of sweeper based. Arena, just draw some cards, another Shieldred when needed, and then whack for white creatures. Kind of mixed into there. I would probably, just looking at some of these decks with like the top end, you might want like another Disdainful Stroke. Just kind of mixed into there. We then have, well, look at this innovation, folks. 55%. It's a Dimir Reanimator, 4-color Reanimator. So it's using like Rona, Evangel Synthesis. You got some Rafines in here. So it's like a 3-4 color. But you're basically putting cards into your graveyard and then reanimating your Atraxa with Cruelty of Gix. So it's kind of a hybrid we've seen in the past. Rakdos Cruelty, Mardu Cruelty. So this was kind of a similar shell. We're seeing a lot of the same cards. Black and white have the best removal in the format. They have the best answers. They have the best threats. And they allow you to best cheat into play Atraxa, which is the best creature in the format. So kind of mixed into there. Your sideboard, again, just removal, hand hate, different types of removals, counters, lilies, and then Path to Peril as a sweeper. That can also just deal with more of the aggressive threats in the format. So we then go to 5-color domain. So 5-color domain, 55% win rate. So this is a ramp deck, predominantly green-white. You have access to exile removal and Sunfall, Ossification, Leyline Binding. Most of the time in this deck will cost like 1 mana thanks to the Triomes, which give you really efficient mana. You ramp with Topiary Stomper as well as the Invasion of Zendikar to get you ahead. Really strong line is turn 3 Invasion, turn 3 Topiary Stomper, turn 4 Invasion, play the 7th line from hand, and then you attack the Invasion and flip it over. So it's kind of a line there that you have. Interesting to see a couple copies of Make Disappear show up in the main board. You have Herd Migration, Italis, and then your Atraxas all as your top end threats. You'll see sometimes, so the big counter to this deck is Elish Norn Mother of Machines, because it stops your opponent's ETBs. So it stops like Archangel, Topiary, the Invasion of Zendikar, basically every removal spell outside of Sunfall in the deck. Your sideboard, Lithomantic Barrage for blue and white things, Stroke for the big mana, Chrome Seed Shark coming in against like low removal decks. You have Howlpack, Piper, as well as Tyrannix Rex. So this is a way to backdoor. So this can't be countered, this can't be countered, and then this can put creatures into play, so you can cheat into play Atraxa. So against heavy counterspell matchups, that's kind of the tech that they're bringing in. There's also Vanquish the Horde in here as a way to have another sweeper for the very go-wide decks. It works nice because it gets a cost reduction. In case you were wondering, what about a deck that just says no to your opponent? Well, we got blue-white control now. Sunfalls, Emperors, Teferis, Eternal Wander in this one. So cleaner mana in this one than the Esper, but less targeted removal. So you have to use stuff like Soul Partition, which isn't like fully removal, but kind of a tempo-based. Lay Down Arms as another removal spell. So you'll see the Triomes being played here to increase the density of planes for that. Thrill of Discovery is a way to draw some cards. You're playing 28 lands, so a pretty high land count that can be used for Thirst. The draw cards plays nice with Teferi since it gets loyalty counters whenever you draw a card. So even though you're drawing 3 with some number being discarded, the Teferi just still sees the 3 cards being drawn. Farmand also helps you find your basic lands. And then similar in the other cases, your counters, your Destroy, Sunset Revelry for the aggressive decks, and then you have a Hullbreaker for kind of the counterspell mirrors. And then lastly, Mono Red was doing well the last couple of weeks, but kind of being pushed out now. So we have like the Tarkir version, no dragons, Furnace Punisher coming in as a way to kind of tax your opponents and ping them. This version's on the 4 Mishra, 2 Sokuzans. I honestly prefer Myrex, I think. This is just, if it gets picked off, you kind of expose your lands. The Myrex can make repeated tokens, doesn't care about life as long as you're getting the poison counters, but just aggressively slanted, bunch of burn kind of mixed into there. Your sideboard against heavy removal decks is bringing in the Planeswalkers, so Koth, Jaya, Chandra for card advantage, Bloody Betrayal to steal big things like Atraxa, Tali, stuff of that nature, Barrages, Bolts, and War for crafting as needed for additional removal. So we'll look at the standard challenge, this 32. So no particular, this is based on the Swiss Johnny Hobbs one. So Johnny Hobbs was, let's see what, so it was on the Esper list. So the Esper list that won, so that's why we're seeing a big amount of it. So this won the challenge, but just kind of quickly going over, we have from the Swiss, just the Orzhov Midrange with Breach the Multiverse that Autumn Burchett played in the PT, so kind of that deck keeps hanging around. We have variations of the Esper Legends decks, the Esper Control deck, which we featured, mono red, the list that we just saw just right now. This one's actually kind of playing 3 Chandras instead of the Koths in there. Esper Control, blue-black Control. Nope, Esper as well. So just lots of Esper Control. Mono-white humans, kind of mono-white aggro. We got some Steel Seraphs in there, Adeline. You have some tax effects, Invasion of Gobukan kind of as a pseudo-Thoughtseize, announcements as well in there. More Esper Control, more white. So this is the mono-black deck. Oh, this is the blue-black deck. So this one's fine. I think the blue-black deck's good. This one's on some Gix commands, some Make Disappears in the main. It will come up to the mono-black version. I don't think this deck's very good. Like, people keep playing it. It's putting up some results, but it's just really bad into these big mana decks. The white decks, just, you kind of get outvalued, I'm finding. So we're seeing like the Dimir decks kind of putting up some results. Mono red, some instances still putting up. Kind of go all the way down to 16th place to find the first forest being played in terms of the Selesnya enchantments. This is the Hallowed Haunting version of the deck. Got Karen's Restoration. So something like this theoretically would be a reasonable choice, because you can, like, Hallowed Haunting is just continuously making creatures, putting pressure on your opponent. But Farewell exists. So Farewell just like, I don't care what you did this game. I'm just going to wipe up everything you hold dear, and just kind of blows you out that way there. More Esper Legends. So you can kind of take a look. I'll link this, but I'm not a fan of where Standard is right now. Again, they did bans, but they didn't balance. And I think that's the biggest problem. And I'm curious to see, like, even if we look into like Alchemy as a format where they haven't been actively managing it. Like, all the new cards are just pushing Rakdos. Or various like Shieldred, Ring, Crucius decks. So kind of seeing like where that kind of comes up. But they need to do a better job balancing these formats. Let me know what you think, if there's any kind of secret under the radar decks that you've been running, having success with. But welcome the thoughts. Catch you next time, and make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.